there's not supposed to be a spirit realm, and all of a sudden you're in the spirit realm. So that's pretty paradigm shattering. Normally, if you come back from a trip from that, that'll do you for a couple of years to try and sort that out and integrate that into your worldview if you can. If you can handle that, or maybe if the dose is big enough, the next thing that happens is that entities appear in the spirit realm. All right, Conor Murphy. The downfall of Conor Murphy. That's what we're going to be talking about today. There was no downfall of Tommy. There was no downfall of genetics, bruh. I dabbled and researched and became obsessed with psychedelics in my early 20s. I took them in places where it was legal to do so, overseas. And I know a lot about them. So I thought it would be interesting to make this video and sort of go into what psychedelics are, how they can be used safely, what the pitfalls can be, how it can all go wrong, some case studies, and relate it back to this completely ridiculous breakdown of Conor Murphy. I mean, he's eating bodily fluids, and he's off his nuts. Somebody needs to hospitalize him, and there's a lesson here, and it's all very interesting. So here we go. Psychedelics. What are they? The best analogy to use, and the best way to look at psychedelics, is to consider them as a valve, some sort of reducing valve. The way you need to see it is that our brains take all of the information, all of the data, all of the light, all of the whatever, particles, and we take it all in as sensory data, as energy, but we don't experience it all because that's not practical, that's not useful. It's not evolutionarily advisable to be looking around at the sky and the tiny little details in the ground and watching the ants scurry and being completely mystified and blown away by the beauty and significance of everything. That doesn't really help in nature when you're trying to just stay safe and stay fed. So evolutionarily, the human brain has learnt to filter out anything that is not related to walking around in 3D time and space and surviving. And so, like, a basic theory of mental illness is that some people's reality tuning device or reality filtering device is a little bit broken, and they don't live in the same reality that everyone else lives in, because they're either taking in too much information or not enough information, and their experience is not congruent with the rest of us. And so what does a psychedelic do? A psychedelic will open this valve right up. It'll open up the floodgates to that which is, that is actually in the world before the human brain filters it. I mean, it's still filtering it to some degree, but way less, way less. Psychedelics aren't the only way to do this. You can go and have some sort of remote experience in nature, or you can fast, or you can flagellate yourself and do some sort of religious ascetic thing. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's spirit quests, rites of passage. It's stuff that indigenous cultures have always done and still do. And in a way, white Western people still kind of do it when they go to their music festivals when they're 17, 18, 19 and take these mind-altering drugs for the first time. That's their rite of passage. That's their initiation. So that's what this is. This is the classic boundary-dissolving shamanic experience where your regular means of viewing reality dissolve and you see reality differently. And that's why people are just like, they'll just stare at a tree and just be blown away like, oh, this tree, oh, I can't believe I never realized before how special the tree is. And they just want to hug the tree and stare at the tree and be one with the tree. It's like, the tree hasn't changed. It's just that it's not evolutionarily useful for you to be marveling at trees all day. So when you take a psychedelic, all of a sudden you take the time to appreciate things like that. But as I said, it's not very useful to your day-to-day life to be walking around marveling at everything. So what happens when you look at the world with your filtering device turned off? Well, that's part of it. Everything seems more rich and significant, and boundaries dissolve. which is a cliche thing to say, that boundaries dissolve, but they do. Boundaries between the inner world and the outer world. In other words, if you're deep into a psychedelic trip with your eyes closed and you're in some crazy far out multi-dimensional space, if you open your eyes, chances are you're still going to be in that space. And so the difference between the inside of your eyeballs, the inside of your mind, and the outside world, that's dissolved. And then that's when you get all this hippy-dippy pseudo-intellectualizing going on, where people talk about the duality dissolving and the boundaries dissolving between me and you and black and white and all this lovey-dovey stuff. Because in that state, that's how it feels. Everything feels as a oneness. But that's no way to live regular life. You see the point I'm maybe starting to hint at here? The overarching point is that there's this experience called the psychedelic experience, which is interesting and perhaps valuable, but it doesn't apply to everyday life. And so if you dissolve all your boundaries in a psychedelic state, that doesn't help you in regular life. And the biggest boundary that dissolves is the boundary between you and other people, and the boundary between you and the world, which is why people just go, oh, I'm one with the world, or I'm one with everybody. It's because their ego has dissolved. Their boundaries have dissolved. It no longer matters. Their ego no longer matters. They still have a self, but most people don't realize they have a self. Most people just live for and with and in ego. And so when the ego is dissolved, they have no true self to fall back on. They're left floating in oneness and in shared unity with everyone and everything. I mean, yeah, that's fine for a couple of hours, but you can't live life like that. And that's sort of hinting at the bigger picture, which is to do with identity and sense of self and ego. Because if you dissolve ego and there's nothing to replace it, you're left with a vacuum. Something is going to rush in to fill the void. And that's how you get these. Well, sometimes you get people who take psychedelics and they end up as just soulless, empty-headed people wandering the streets. I've seen it, like acid casualties, where they wipe the hard drive, but they don't then replace it with anything. Or then there's these other people who they wipe the hard drive, but then what they replace it with is crap. It's crystal munching, hippy-dippy, everything is vibrations. Everything is vibrations, man. Like, that's what fills the void. So if you don't have a true sense of self, or you are not trying to find or to forge a true sense of self, dissolving your ego is not a very good idea. But to do that, to get into a psychedelic state where you truly go deep, you see the visions, you have the ego dissolving experience, that's a very specific type of psychedelic experience. It can happen through sheer dosage. If you crank the dosage, that's probably going to happen no matter what. But if you have a sensible dosage, but you have the right set and setting, namely quiet, introspective, no other people around, you just go in deep into your mind, that's how you have the true ego dissolving, boundary dissolving psychedelic experience. You have to try and make it happen. Or, as I said, just crank the dosage and it'll probably happen no matter what, but it'll probably happen where and when you don't want it to. So that's what I would call like the true psychedelic visionary experience. Say like 3 to 5 grams of dried mushrooms, or a couple hundred mics of LSD, or a good hit of DMT by yourself, dark room, meditative, go in deep, see what it's all about, but you have to be careful, you have to weigh the dose, you don't want to overdo it. And that's when you will have the true psychedelic experience, which can either be beneficial to personal growth and development, or it can be negative. No one's saying that it's always a benefit to do these things. So that's the first main obvious way to do psychedelics. You do it as a legitimate, proper psychedelic experience, or you can kind of do it recreationally. And recreationally means the setting, and the dose. For the love of God, if you're going to dabble in this stuff, know what your doses are. It's as simple as that. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to take any other drug and not know what the doses are, yet some people think it's just a good idea to just eat a few mushrooms. How much do they weigh? Oh, I don't know, I just ate a few. You're stupid. Very, very stupid. The difference between 1 mushroom or 3 mushrooms, the number means nothing. It's the weight. I mean, come on, I can't believe that even has to be said. I'm sorry to insult your intelligence. So you can do it recreationally, and if you're going to do it recreationally, do it in nature, do it with people you trust, don't do it in a nightclub, and have a small controlled dose, and you probably will not have a complete ego-dissolving, boundary-dissolving psychedelic experience. You might get a little hint of it, but it won't be the same as if you just set your intentions and set yourself up in a dark room. It will not be like that. And that's why when some people say, oh yeah, I've done psychedelics, well, it's like, have you really? Or have you just gone to the river and taken some acid with your friends and drunk beer? Because it's not the same. Right, so the question is this a good idea? Should you do it? The recreational thing is obvious. It's called recreational for a reason. It's fun. The proper one, well, that's what we're going to talk about. Should everybody do it? No. Will everybody benefit from it? No. Has Connor Murphy benefited from it? I would say no. I'd say that man probably doesn't have any money left. I mean, I'm sure Derek will give an update soon, but is the man in hospital yet? Okay, some things you might want to think about before you decide to do it. Okay, I've been cranking caffeine all morning. Sorry to be all edgy. Okay, things to consider if you are wondering if psychedelics are a good idea. Is your personality, is your sense of self stable and productive? Are you happy with who you are? Are you relatively the same person all year round? Are you getting places in life? Do you feel like you are either thriving or on the verge of thriving? Because if you say yes to that question, you probably don't want to mess with it. Like, don't mess with a good thing. There's no need to do that. Next thing to consider. Do you have a burning desire to get in touch with the spiritual or the transcendental? Because the psychedelic experience, if you do it the proper way, is the direct access to the transcendental, for good or for worse, for angels or for demons. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's just as much of a negative, dark place as it is a place of light and beauty, because reality, the world, it's not just what we want it to be. Therefore, the spiritual world is not just what we want it to be. Are you young? Do you even have a stable sense of self yet? If you're a teenager, or a young adult, it's pretty debatable whether or not this is a good thing or not. Because if you're still trying to work out who you are, I don't know, if you're going down a negative track, this might be a good thing. But if you're already on the right track, it might not be a good thing. Traditionally, this was how it was done. Teenage boys, or maybe, I don't know if it was the girls, in most primitive cultures, it's just the boys that get initiated into these things. The teenage boys were taken out into the wilderness often to have a psychedelic experience. And that's how they were initiated into the religion of the tribe, the ways of the tribe, the true reality of the world. I personally can see the benefit in that, but it's super risky because the teenage brain is still developing, and it honestly best might just be to leave it alone. So I'm not giving any prescriptions here. This is totally an open question about young people or people that don't have a solid sense of self. I don't know. The best case scenario for someone who should use psychedelics is someone who is stable in their personality and has a burning desire to explore the transcendental. That's just the obvious one. That just makes the most sense. These people are trying to get to these realms without psychedelics. So it's not like they're going to get something they didn't want when they finally enter into that space and they're confronted with the spiritual realm. Another best case scenario for someone who should take them is someone who is addicted to a substance, whether it's alcohol or heroin or even cigarettes, because the psychedelic experience will dissolve your boundaries, will dissolve your ego. It'll also dissolve your addictions and your attachments to things. And it'll also dissolve your ego to the point where your sense of self can step back and look at your life without the ego clouding everything as a defense mechanism and say, wow, I'm killing myself, or wow, I'm ruining my life. And 9 times out of 10, a junkie who takes a proper dose and has a proper psychedelic experience will at least be temporarily, for a year or two, cured of their addiction. And normally all they have to do to cure it again is get back on the LSD train. And that's to say nothing for ibogaine, which actually can treat it pharmacologically as well as experientially. best case scenario, I've written a Rite of Passage. Yeah, I mean, it could help build identity. It could help build a personality if that young person is already rational. Because if they're not rational, they can take things out of the experience that will not set them up well for success. It'll set them up for delusions of grandeur. It'll set them up for laziness and excuse making, and ultimately failure. Because what comes out of the psychedelic experience is profound, but it's also ambiguous, and you need to be able to make sense of it in the down, rational, regular state of mind. It's the difference between thinking I'm not shit and I am the shit. Like, you can either come out of the psychedelic experience humbled and grateful, or completely messianic and thinking that you need to go and spread the good word and heal and help everybody. And that's really getting to the crux of it. Now we're going to start talking about Connor Murphy and also someone I knew growing up who had a similar thing happen to them as is currently happening to Connor. A lot of the time, people with the biggest egos have the most fragile egos. Like something that large, it's like a massive house of cards. The bigger it is, the more fragile it is. And for someone like Connor Murphy, who, I mean, it's a cliche to say that everyone in the fitness industry or everyone who's a social media influencer is a narcissist or is ego-driven, but there is some truth to it. A large proportion of these people are textbook narcissists and who have sought fame and recognition as a way of validation. I would hazard a guess that that is certainly the case with Connor Murphy. And that's the worst combination. So if you came back from a psychedelic experience and you had seen the light, you had seen the ills of the world and how to cure them, and you wanted to go and spread the good word, well, back in the day, you were limited to standing on your local street corner and hassling the locals going about their business. But when a man has a 6-figure following on social media, or 7-figure, I don't know, combined, probably 7-figure following, he's not going to be confined to his local street corner, ranting and rambling. He's going to be ranting and rambling to millions of people, young, impressionable people, who are going to provide a feedback loop of validation and attention, and it's going to spiral out of control, which is clearly what has happened. It's spiraled out of control. It started with the first ayahuasca trip, where he lost all his gains and had the big fast, and then it's gone into the tantric thing and the bodily fluids, and now he's into just complete ego dissolution, and he doesn't even think he needs to have a bank account anymore, because he's one with the world. That's directly related to the boundary dissolving effect of the psychedelics. The man's ego, his sense of self, the thing that was driving the vehicle called Connor Murphy, was wiped away by high-dose psychedelic trips, and each time it recreates itself, it's a caricature of a caricature of a caricature of a frail ego that doesn't even exist anymore. It's simulacrum all the way down for the poor lad. He's got no substance anymore. Any little thought that pops into his head is a revelation and must be spread with everybody. And as I said, because we live because of his audience and because of the times where you can't tell people they're nuts and you have to celebrate this and tolerate that, he's not getting a lot of pushback. And psychedelic hippie culture is pretty normalized, so he's just off and running. He's going to start a cult if no one stops him, or if he doesn't get stopped, because technically he hasn't hurt anybody yet, but he's hurting himself. So someone close to him should be doing something, because he's clearly lost his marbles. And I've seen it happen before. A young man I used to know who had a very frail ego. He had a hard life, lost his father young, turned to Buddhism and esoterica and psychedelics at a very young age, went off traveling to India, to become a better man, came back the same, started taking low doses of mushrooms every day, half a gram here, half a gram there, but always every day. And because he was a malnourished vegan, his body was completely depleted of nutrients and minerals. And the taxing effect of the continual use of psychedelics, it leaves your brain in some sort of super serotonated state. And that's when the Messiah complex goes out of control. That's when you get people coming to their friends and family saying, you may no longer call me Michael, I am now called Michael Ratutrato, and I am here. And they go off the planet. This one friend of mine, he ended up in a hospital for 2 weeks. He thought he had a new name, he had a new mission, he was going to save the world. He tried to prove to us that he was still sane by eating a lit cigarette. Like, yeah, look, I'm not crazy. Would a crazy person do this? And we're like, yeah, bruh, you finally lost it. Many such cases. Frail, narcissistic, weak egos should not touch psychedelics with a 10-foot pole. But those people are so unself-aware that they don't know not to go near them. So what do you do? What do you do? There's nothing you can do. So to get back to Connor, there's two scenarios here, or an interplay. There's an interplay of two scenarios, two factors, if you will. There's one that's a better case scenario, which is that he's chasing peak experiences. If you've lived a regular humdrum life and you've never had an ecstatic, psychedelic, or even MDMA-like experience, that will blow your mind. To not know that you can feel that good and that happy and that joyous, and to want to dance and hug and love and be in the moment. Those moments you want to last forever. Like, you literally do. And sometimes they feel like they're timeless moments, but they do end. You come down. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, some lame old psychologists, they called these peak experiences, and they spoke about how the trap of psychedelics and that sort of approach is that people get hooked on wanting peak experiences when life is about ups and downs, low experiences, peak experiences, and really you're aiming to get the best sort of mid-ground as possible, the everyday, the humdrum, because you can't live life for peak experiences. Even with psychedelics, some people can't help but live for peak experiences. They want to go to the club every weekend, they want to go to festivals, they always want to do extreme sports and chase thrills. That's this tendency for humans to chase peak experiences. Which, I mean, yeah, it can be a good thing. It obviously drives human innovation and progress, but it can also be a detriment when those things are dangerous, potentially very dangerous. So this is super common. It's like raver burnout, it's like bush doof burnout. It's people that lean too hard into the world of psychedelics and mysticism because they're chasing that rush of the ecstatic, of being in touch with the transcendental. Because there's no other way to get that on tap unless you're a born mystic, which very few of us are. Now here's the worst case scenario. Basically his serotonin system is completely cooked. He's malnourished. All the minerals and electrolytes and all that stuff that needs to be in high supply to replenish the depletion that happens when you have one of these extremely taxing experiences. I'm sure the man is completely depleted, and I'm sure his serotonin system is completely haywire because of how often he's pumping in psychedelic substances. That will cause a mental health episode. That's just how it happens. You pump too much of this stuff in, your brain can't flush out serotonin. I'm pretty sure that's the driving neurochemical behind this. And you'll end up needing to be hospitalized so that you can calm down and replenish your body and return to baseline. But people don't want to calm down when they're in that state. They want to go and save the world and tell everybody that they're the second coming of Jesus Christ. So the man needs to go to hospital. Somebody send Connor to hospital. He needs to clean out and relax. Reset his brain chemistry. But the problem is, when you're in that state of ecstasy, you're just going to keep pumping it because you're having so much fun. You don't want to stop. So this is where you actually need somebody to intervene and pretty much send you to hospital. So what are the lessons here? For the average person, for Connor Murphy, for you listening, for Derek, if you're going to do them, research everything that you can. research the good things that can happen, the bad things that can happen, the common ways that people react, and try and work through it all beforehand. If it's a common trope that everybody comes back from a psychedelic experience wanting to be a messiah and change the world, maybe have some rational thought about that to yourself beforehand, about what you're going to do if you find yourself in that position. Like, set yourself up some notes and some triggers to catch yourself if this happens, because it could happen. The ideal scenario is that, well, it depends what you want out of it. If you're trying to maybe find yourself and you're not sure who you are or where you're going with life, that can be risky, because you can end up replacing your old operating system with this wishy-washy, lovey-dovey, everything is one, I don't need material possessions. That's what you replace your operating system with, and you'll end up going nowhere in life. At the end of the day, even if it is all one, and we are all one with each other and one with nature and one with God, you still need to live and sleep and eat. There's still people out there that want to hurt you, that will steal and rob and rape and war and pillage. Doesn't change the facts of the matter that we are, according to some, advanced apes trying to survive in an absolutely insane world, and that maybe preaching oneness and tolerance and love and understanding should come secondary to setting yourself up for a comfortable life. I think that's the biggest mistake that young people make. They put everything else on the back burner and just want to go sit around and do nothing and think that that's somehow helping things. It's not helping yourself. It's not helping anybody. Go get a house. Go get a job. Go make yourself comfortable. Because until you do that, you're just going to be a burden. This is the thing with Connor. Connor is now become a burden on everybody. People are worrying about him. He is negatively influencing his followers. So why is he doing it? Because he's not helping anybody. He's not helping himself. If psychedelic things are wonderful and are helpful, well, he's just turning people off them. But that's because this is not rational, this is not sensible, this is not thought out. He is having a mental health crisis because he is completely burnt out on psychedelic drugs, which run on the serotonin system. Send the man to hospital, spread the good word that only certain people should touch this stuff. If you have no interest in seeking the transcendental, if you have no interest in seeking the spirit realm, if you have no interest in looking into the deepest depths of your personality, and you're pretty happy with yourself, don't touch them. It's not worth it. It's not worth messing with a good thing. Alright, I could end the video here, but I just want to give a brief description of what a proper psychedelic experience is like. So say you've taken 3 grams of mushrooms, 3 to 4, 2.5 grams to 4 grams of mushrooms. You've had a nice calm day, you've had simple, easily digestible meals, so your system is not bogged down and heavy, but you're also not hungry and depleted, a nice middle ground. Empty your bladder, you don't want to be going to the toilet too much, but don't want to be dehydrated, just everything nice and even, not too heavy, not too light. Late afternoon, early evening, turn your phone off, lock your doors, tell anybody that could interrupt you to leave you alone, but tell somebody, some trusted friend, that if something goes wrong, you may need to call them for help. And just let them know to keep their phone on them. Someone that's ideally lives nearby or is in the same house. But you don't want them anywhere near you. You don't want them to come into the room. You don't want any chance of interruption. They have to wait for you to call them. So if you're religious, say a prayer, set your intentions, clear your mind. You don't want to be worrying about your bills or your girlfriend or your job. Have a clear head. If you don't have a clear head, save it. If you've got any weird voodoo or superstition about the time of week or full moons or this or that, make sure everything is just sweet. And then eat them. Don't make a big deal about it, just eat them. Don't need to make a tea or put them with bread, just eat them. It's okay, you'll be right. Wash them down with a little water. And then just sit or lay there. And don't do anything. Just lay there and breathe slowly, steadily. Feel your heart rate. Feel everything start to tingle. Close your eyes and watch what happens behind your eyelids. Because the normal experience of just grey sort of movement, whatever you normally get behind your eyelids, that will start to change. And at first you'll get little flickers of colour and you'll go, oh, did I imagine that, or did I just see a little bit of purple there, or a little fleck of yellow? And then the little speckles and flecks will increase, and then they'll become patterns, They will become dynamic, interlaced, intermoving patterns where they are both something and nothing at once. And then they'll become pictures, they could become visions. And then eventually you realize you're no longer looking at something, but you're in fact in a world. No longer is it the experience of looking at a slideshow behind your eyelids. The slideshow has become reality, and you are now in that reality. And when you are properly in there, it doesn't matter if you open your eyes. You are now in that place until you do something drastic to snap yourself out of it. And there's certain levels to this place. The first level of the place is just experiencing the place. And the place is the transcendental realm, the spirit realm, if you will. And that is just a complete mind blower and paradigm exploder, that is enough for most people, and the trip will not progress much past that. Because already your whole worldview was based around regular three-dimensional time and space, regular Newtonian materialism, where things are just, lifeless matter, energy bumping around. There's not supposed to be a spirit realm, and all of a sudden you're in the spirit realm. So that's pretty paradigm shattering. Normally, if you come back from the trip from that, that'll do you for a couple of years to try and sort that out and integrate that into your worldview if you can. If you can handle that, or maybe if the dose is big enough, the next thing that happens is that entities appear in the spirit realm. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. That's where the elves come from, the DMT elves, the great elf rave in heaven. And that may or may not be what's there. That's where the angels and the demons lie. That's where the pranksters and the entities live. And you may or may not want to go there because it's real. That's it. That's all I'll say. Because, quite frankly, I haven't spent a lot of time with the entities. I got freaked out enough at the space. So do with that information what you will. Be careful. Do your research. Be careful. God bless. God bless Connor Murphy. Good luck to him. Someone needs to put that boy in a hospital bed for a couple of weeks. Namaste, motherfuckers.